right, welcome everyone. This is year number 5, 2023, the 5th year of blooms in the Reinhardt Peony Garden, otherwise known completely as the Howard and ChinWon. ChinWon is still with us. Howard and ChinWon Reinhardt Peony Garden. This is the first, and so far we think only, peony garden, public peony garden, and it's got, in order to be the first and only, it has to be dedicated entirely to peonies. It has to be public and it has to be dedicated to peonies. There are peony sections in other gardens in the Northwest or in the North, and oftentimes there are demonstration gardens and nurseries. But this is a garden completely dedicated for the public to come and enjoy. They don't have to buy anything, but they may eventually figure out they want to volunteer to help weed, because it's public in that way too. There's nobody paid to do anything here except we have to have donations, thank you very much, to replace, buy, nurture, expand, whatever, develop. For maintenance and development, we have to have public funds. So we're working on all that always. I'm Steven Hesla, and I'm part of the committee that started this garden in the fall of 2018. We broke ground. By October of 2018, we planted 220 at least, maybe 230 already, bare roots and potted plants. And by 2019, we had our first baby blooms. So 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, year number 5. This is an interesting, if we scan, this already is one of our early blooming peonies, Athena. And you will find if you visit the garden that there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, A, B, C, D, E, and F gardens. Gardens A, Gardens B, Garden C, right here. And Garden D begins with, I'll just show behind Athena. There are only, these are reminders for those who watch these little reminder shows. This is the one of 2 native peonies to the Western Hemisphere, period. There are only 2. And one grows in Montana at 3,000 feet or higher in the mountains. And I don't know of anybody, we've not met anybody who's seen it in the wild in Montana, but we have seen it in the wild in Oregon and Idaho. It exists in Washington. So this is its second year of this particular plant that we were able to put in, and it's looking better than ever, but it hasn't bloomed yet. So maybe next year. But that's Garden D1, and Garden D2 is Athena. And this was a hard winter, so let's just be honest about this, folks. This is why we need funding, partly. Garden D3 and Garden D4 have given up. And it's kind of sad because they were, especially this big one here, was just prolific. We had to cut it back to keep it from taking over the walkway here almost. But we will get them replaced. We had this 20 below zero for a few weeks way back in December, January, somewhere there, and they seem to have succumbed. So it can happen, but we're working on all of that, and mostly the garden is working toward thriving. You can see that they have grown quite a bit already. So I've started out thinking today that there is a saying by the peony growers in Oregon. We're going to visit these wonderful people this weekend, a road trip for 4 of us, to go and talk to them about the garden and what we can do to improve, to enhance, to enjoy, to appreciate everything, and they will help us. And they say that peonies, when you plant them, they sleep and they creep and then they leap. So as we go along, you'll see that in bed D, we have several now that have leapt. So that's peonies that are now pretty much going to be here. How long should we expect these peonies to live? Well, if they're weeded and they're nourished and they're maintained and they have water and good weather, meaning they tolerate a lot of weather variants, but if they have all those things, these peonies should be here in 100 years still. We're having to replace something that dies, but they don't have any particular lifespan. They don't wear out. They may stop expanding as much. They don't tend, because of their root system, they don't tend to do like iris and other lilies and just keep sending out new plants and sending up. They tend to strengthen their main core root, which can be a hunk of stuff with all kinds of spread out a little bit, but not a lot. So we're not too worried about peonies sort of just competing for the space. They tend to stay in their own boundary. So that's a kind of an interesting thing. This is our little ground cover, kinnick, and by now we thought it would be just everywhere except messing up with the peony beds or the peony spaces. But the truth of it, we're learning, because gardens are great teachers, we're learning that the deer love to eat kinnick all winter long. And so far it's coming back mostly each year, but it never gets to really flourish. So later on we might show that we're trying some vinca, which can spread and root, and so we keep learning. So we don't know if we can count on the kinnick to do the ground cover thing. It was supposed to spread for beauty and also for keeping weeds down. And we do work, and you don't see a lot of weeds, and our mulch is still helping. So we aren't seeing a lot of blooms, but if we see, we'll talk a little bit about foliage, because even all of these herbaceous peonies, of which the majority in this garden of 231 spaces, these are herbaceous peonies. Herbaceous are the most common. And since the time of mini hybrids, we have, I think there's more than 7,000 now that are named. We have 213 different named peonies in this garden. Some of them are named gift of our friend Madeline, and so it isn't an official name. But peonies are always making new babies. Look at this bee right here this is Scarlet O'Hara back here. And Scarlet O'Hara is going to bloom just in a couple of days, and this bee is quite excited. And they will bring pollen back and forth, as they do with tomatoes and beans and everything. And as these seed pods then would grow through the summer, we don't use them because you would never know, you couldn't name it. This is Mackinac. In Michigan, it's the Mackinac Bridge, and it's spelled like Mackinac, but it's pronounced Mackinac, so we're going to call this the Mackinac Grand. And look at the foliage. If you are familiar with peony foliage, if you compare this Mackinac Grand with the foliage, and these are both herbaceous plants, and we'll review what they do, and the foliage of Scarlet O'Hara, this is kind of more what people, if you look down here, especially where my finger is pointing, that's a typical peony expectation of a leaf. And you expect that more than you expect this sort of, I don't know, just different, refreshingly different leaf formation. So the varieties, once they have their characteristics and they remain true, they're pretty true to stay that way forever. Sometimes peonies through a series of years will develop from sort of a form that's more primitive to a more elaborate form as the plant itself matures. And we're kind of watching those things. But these are very healthy plants. Herbaceous plants, they die back every winter in the fall. I mean, they die back for the winter. In the autumn, with the first freezes, the leaves are gone, the stems are soft, and they die back to the ground. And we have to take a few hours to take away all that foliage so we don't encourage sort of fungus and kind of bacterial things, or even insects, nests for eggs or whatever. We try to get away all the foliage, so there are jobs available. Give us a call. Go on Facebook. Like us on Facebook and send a message, and we can maybe get the message. So lots of young peonies that are sleeping or creeping still. Some of these are newer plantings. Some of them are just taking their time to get happy, and we give them a chance. So Callie's Memory. This is an Ito. Now, Itos have very pointy leaves, even more pointy than the normal herbaceous ones. They have points in the end, but other characteristic of the Itos is the pointy bud. The buds of most all herbaceous peonies do not have pointy buds. They have the rounded globe bud. But the reason for these pointy buds on the Itos is that the Itos, and this is reminders now from several videos, that the Itos are hybrids of the pollen from a tree peony to the carpel, which is the ovary, the female part, of an herbaceous peony. And they tried thousands of efforts to see if they could cross a tree. Back here in the back row is a tree. This is called tree peony white. It doesn't have a name because it's an original. It's unhybridized, and so it's what it is. And we'll have, we know of one bud on this. We're not telling people because we have had, I'm sorry to say, a very eager peony thief who stealthily visits this garden seemingly when nobody else is around, and sometimes takes the only bud or bloom. Can you believe? Takes the only bloom from a plant and thinks that this person, we have seen a person that we suspect, and we're kind of keeping an eye out for that person. But the good news is that we are now getting at the University of Montana, and this is on the Phyllis Washington Gardens in the Phyllis J. Washington Park of the campus. And this is on the Prescott House. Over here, Ron can show the Prescott House. Clarence Prescott lived to be, I think he lived to be 100, but it could have been 99. And he lived here his whole life till the last couple weeks. And this was his property, his family property, and his niece, if you will, cousin niece, she called herself. I met her one day here at the park and at the garden, and she said, I can tell you that this is exactly where his gladiolas were growing. And I used to talk to Mr. Prescott. He didn't know me by name because he knew everybody by visiting when they walked by his garden. On their way to the M trail up here, I'm pointing toward the M trail. Those pear trees were Mr. Prescott's. The lilac bushes back there are from Mr. Prescott and the Prescott family all the way back. This is one of the original houses. This house was here. The yellow house over there was here before Main Hall. When I watched him give a news report one night to an interview, and they said, well, what did you guys do when you lived here in this house? I mean, you were like almost original. Yes, we were original. I remember one night after supper, I think he called it, the whole family went for a walk over to see the big hole. And the big hole was the machinery that was digging the basement, in effect, or the foundation for the moorings for the Main Hall. And so he talked about watching that happen, and that building went up, it wasn't 1893, but it was sometime thereafter. Jeanette Rankin Hall, I believe, was the first building on campus, but I could be wrong, and that building is still here. So these peonies should be here, and Mr. Prescott was here, and his cousin niece was here talking about him. It's a lot of history in this beautiful garden. We have more herbaceous peonies here. I'm going to remind us that the tree and the cross between a tree and an herbaceous comes to be named the Ito, I-T-O-H. And I'm told by our friend ChinWon, who's Korean, that Ito in Japan is sort of like Smith. Very common name, not a special name, but it's a special peony because only the pollen of, well, I will not say only, almost only the pollen from the male part of the tree peony was the only way they could finally get 8 little pots, 8 little containers in Japan. And he got these in 1948, just after World War II. And he and his family watched miraculously, maybe it was 7, but I think it was 8, and it was 1948, I remember that part. And these, surprise, they finally got some life out of all these attempts to cross-pollinate between herbaceous and tree, or tree and herbaceous. And they came up with these little things, but he only lived 8 more years till 1956. The plants were still there, the 7 or 8 plants, and his family was still there, but he passed in 1956. And then 8 years after that, so that was 1964, came the first blooms from those 7. So it took 16 years before those plants slept and then crept and then leapt to make the first itos. Now you can make itos. The reason I said I should not say only the male pollen from the tree and only the female carpels from herbaceous can be crossed, because people kept trying, and the people we're going to visit this weekend in Oregon, Hood River and Salem, Oregon, we're going to visit. A group of 4 of us are going over to meet with the providers of many of these bare roots. Bare roots for this garden has proved to be the way to go. If we plant pots, we get plants that are already flourishing in the pot. We're not sure why, but they have more trouble than the bare roots. There's probably more energy in a big globby, like a potato. These were, I think, no, I can't say. Deer don't like something in these leaves, for example, so I don't think the roots were ever food for deer or for people. But I'm going to tell, sorry it's taking me a while to get to the end of this thought, that they found one surprise. I think the plant has a name sort of like surprise. They've had only one case where the male pollen, the pollen from an herbaceous, was able to cross with the carpels in a tree. It came out backwards and it worked. That I have to look up, so I may have to correct that in the next video. But Itos came to be the name because he was the original success of getting this plant, a cross between a tree and herbaceous. So, Ito, maybe Smith, if it had been an American success story. They now can be hybridized quite readily, and there's many. This one's called Callie's Memory. We have, I believe, 13 Itos. Of our 231, 13, I believe, are Itos, or 11. And then we have about the same number of trees, of which you saw up here too. The trees gave up their life this winter with the hard 20 below zeros for a while. Okay, moving along. So we're not looking much at blooms today because everything's budded, but here's a great example of a peony where there's multiple buds per stem. And this has a great name, and here again we're reviewing for those who've seen other videos. But multiple, and ladybug, haha, I love it. Multiple buds per stem. Lactiflora is the name for that. Lactiflora came to mean, among hybrids, if they say it's lactiflora, that will mean that they look for multiple buds per stem. Look how the lead bud is clearly the champion. That will be the first to bloom and probably the biggest bloom. But look what happens. You get all these blooms for maybe 2 more weeks. And they aren't necessarily going to be puny just because the buds are little now. The buds will get similarly bigger, but maybe not quite as big as the lead bud. Celebrity is the name of this one. I'm wondering if this is top brass or maybe not. So let me look. No, this is Coral Sunset. Oh, great color. You got to come many times if you're watching these videos. Don't spend too much time in the videos. Come and see the garden many times. Here's top brass. This is going to be fabulous. It'll be what's called, it's lactiflora, and I'll kind of try to remember to tell you guys what lactiflora means. I will do it right now. Lacta is from lactose. Lactose is milk. Milk is white. And originally, the lactiflora is the parent of many, many hybrids. It goes back thousands of years in China. Peonies were like only the royal people, maybe, or they were the only ones with enough land, maybe, that they owned, could have peony gardens. Here's another ladybug. Could be a man bug, I don't know. But, okay, so lactiflora is, again, white flower. So this one does have white flowers. It's going to be spectacular. Come and see it. Top brass. There's like a whole bunch of little trumpets coming out the top, maybe. So it's a bomb. A bomb has like 4th of July, extra petals from the center coming up like a spray of petals on top of the usual double peony, which are very common and very much desired. Speaking of leaping and creeping, this minuet, 2 years ago, we just had this little tiny sprig, looked like a little dandelion you didn't even want to keep. And we didn't even let it bloom because it was so weak. And we thought, oh, it's never going to make it. And last summer it leapt, and we think now it's going to just keep becoming more like top brass and these other guys here. It's showing signs of wanting to stay. Sparkling Star right next to it. Similarly, both of those are lactiflora, and they're not white. So again, it's because the parent from thousands of years ago in China was a little plant that produced multiple buds per stem, and they were white. They were only white. Colors have come in since hybridization has become so popular. So we have blooms just coming on now. We're getting ready to go. And this is such a prolific part of the garden right now. This is where we have a lot of settling in. So Athena is a single bloom. This is probably our, I don't know, 8th or 9th plant to bloom this year. And it's always early. And it has the herbaceous foliage, and it dies back in the fall to nothing. And these single blooms are 1 or 2 rows of guard petals, and the stamens consisting of, look at those healthy anthers. The anthers are the part with the pollen, and they're on a filament, and that filament and the anther and the pollen together form this, are named, comprise the stamen. The filaments are so tiny in there, just little hair roots. They're not roots, but looks like little filaments is exactly the right word. Fiber optics for plants. Single blooms, almost all of our early blooms are single. Coming soon will be the doubles and the semi-doubles and all the forms. Coming soon, Honor. Just getting ready. Gorgeous color. Every year it's a beautiful plant and beautiful blooms. I think also single, but I'm starting to memorize what they are. And I can't tell when they aren't blooming. Let's look a little quickly here. Red Grace, another herbaceous peony, right next to an ito. Look at the pointy leaves. Look at the pointy buds of the ito soon to come. Canary Brilliance, going to be a beautiful yellow. These are so ugly when they're in bud stage. Sometimes you think it's just a head of cabbage. But this is one of the greatest flowers in the garden. A beautiful color. I think there's 10 or more this year. And they last like 6-7 days if it doesn't get too hot. They endure, they hang in, and they are probably done within 2 weeks certainly, and these are pretty much, I'm not going to say totally, they tend to be single bud per stem, but look, every now and then even the ones that are mostly single bud per stem have a little side bud. But if they're single bud per stem, they aren't called lactiflora. So I'm guessing this one would not be. I saw one other hiding little side buds someplace. But look, there'll be a late guy here. So this will go on for a little while. Great peony. Coming soon, etched salmon, I believe. We'll see when we get to the other side. Another herbaceous peony. And nice color in the bloom, salmon colored. This one is our pride and joy in a way because 1768 is our oldest registered peony, and it's going to have these scarlet, red, orange, simple single blooms. And this was found in approximately 1750 by an English botanist, British botanist, who was exploring the Mediterranean, and on the hillsides of western Turkey overlooking the Mediterranean he found these wild peonies, and this is from that original root. In order to be called the same for every place that this peony would grow, it has to come only from the root. Can't ever come from seed, because seed is going to be some kind of hybrid. And it tends to sort of spread a little bit low. It doesn't get height as much as it gets breadth. So it peregrinates. Peregrinate is to wander. The peregrine falcon wanders 100 miles a day or more to hunt for food. So this one wanders, it spreads, and it's ancient. It's forever old. There's fewer than 40. Some say 35, some say fewer, some say even fewer than 20. It's a botanical question, I guess. But there's fewer than 40 species peonies in the world. And this, even though it has a date, it's a species, meaning it's thousands of years old. and thousands of years old. It's original still. So 1768 was when Philip Miller, I believe, of England, got enough going on this to share roots with people that wanted to grow it, and so they could register this with the British Horticultural Society at the time. And now we have the American Peony Society and others. We have a German listing as well, and I'm sure there's British listings and registrations of peonies. And once they're registered, then they're eligible to be sold or shared as from that original root. So that's Peregrina. Here's another Ito that'll be coming soon. Here's another Ito that'll be coming soon, morning lilac. Here's our little heritage garden with gifted peonies from the Reinhardts. So there's 1, 2, 3 white ones in a row, and there's 2 pinkish red or reddish pink ones. Dark pink, we even call it, personally. They called them pink, but we think in this garden they seem to almost red. But those are gifts. Here's the fern leaves. The fern leaves are the earliest. This one is also a species peony. And the species peonies are earliest to bloom, single buds. Here's the carpels already cross-pollinated by something, so there's going to be some seeds, but we won't bother finding out what they would grow. And fern leaf is just a very special, looks almost like asparagus, very gentle ferns. We have several of these in the garden. And if you see species on the side, it means the original still. We have a few. But if you see a fern leaf that isn't a species and it has a date, then other than Peregrina, this is a hybrid. So one of the parents is going to be one of the species peonies. And it combined with something else came out to something. This one just finished, dropped its petals in the last couple days. So these are the earliest ones. Often the fern leaf ones are the earliest. Hiding away. That's early bird. It's not a bird, really. And it doesn't fly, but it is leaping.
It's a little chick.
Yeah, it's a little chick. Hey, guys. Good morning. So here we have, this was planted last year in a pot. We had 4 coming out of the pot, but once it's in its first year of surviving its first winter, we're not disappointed that it only sent up 1, and we'll keep an eye on it for next year and hope that it, look at that price tag, $70. This is species also. This is from the original plant, thousands of years old, fern leaf. This is even fernier, isn't it? It looks like asparagus. So fine. And we may not let it bloom. Gary thinks we will because it was already a plant last year. It wasn't only a bare root. It had 4 blooms last summer, and it's a double. Look at that picture. So most of the species plants and most of the fern leaf ones are singles, but this is rare, and very rare that we have a whole plant at home, Ron, with about 15 or 20 of them. Viking Vanguard is over here. Hi, Guy. How are you? Yeah. Ruby. This is Ruby Red. She's a double. Yeah. So here we have Viking Vanguard, and I'll just step in a little bit. Viking Vanguard's sign is right over here, but this is a single again, and these early ones tend to be singles, so there's a very simplistic stamen with the filament and the anther and the pollen on the anther, and then the guard petals. Just, you could say 2 rows, but maybe it's really only 1. I can't tell. I'm not an expert on when 1 is really 2, but simple in its, and it's lactiflora. Look at, there's multiple buds per stem. Okay, so several of our early ones have already finished, and here comes our next set, which will be doubles. And here's one of our great ones, Carnation Bouquet. It looks like that little cabbage, but it's going to open up and you'll think, oh, what a giant carnation flower. It really has the look of a carnation. Madame de Verneville, come and we like to have the fragrant ones in the front row. And this is our most fragrant rose, but peony. And it's very sniffy. Nothing yet, but soon. We think it's named after Margaret Baldridge, our concert master of the violin in the Missoula Symphony, but it isn't. She would like to think so. So we just call her Princess Margaret. So our friend Margaret Baldridge. Salmon Beauty. There we go. I bet it is named after Princess Margaret of England. Salmon Beauty is not named after any beauty in particular, but it has the color of salmon, and it's a double. And this is Bola Beauty, and for some reason we seem to have lost Garden Peace back there, so we're learning about that. Here is Mary Mayshine. That's another early one. It's really beautiful color. Lactiflora, but look, it's almost fern leaf. So one of its parents probably was the fern leaf species. So here's Lactiflora, several buds per stem. And there's the carpels in the very center of the stamens and the pollen. You know, a good question that I don't know the answer to is, if the bees don't come, do they self-pollinate? You know, does the pollen just whiff off in the wind and go to the carpel and make its seeds? Here is soon to be, like by tonight. This is already just ready to pop. This is even readier. An hour ago it wasn't popping. Promenade. Oh, look at the ants. You get a rare view of the ants, which aren't needed to open the peonies, but are welcome. So we just don't seem to have ant hills around here, which is okay, because they don't need them. But they go after the sugars. The ants love the sugars. So these two guys are going to be open. This one will be not far behind. And you see how one petal pops first, and then it's sort of like they unfold in sequence because of the way they overlap. So when this one relaxes, then the next one can come. And when that relaxes open, then the next one. So they sort of spiral as they open. Look at this leaf here, it's great. Tiny, tiny. This is meant to be on the corner here, Fairy Princess. We try to have peonies that are shorter going toward peonies that are taller. And the tree peonies are in the center of the garden. Soon you'll see Ezra Pound. Look at that, Ezra Pound is showing already. We'll catch that so people can look quickly and soon. And so many of these early ones are single roselet, 1950. Our Festiva Maxima is over here by under the Austrian pine, and that's 1851. I know we have an 1844. We have Peregrina from 1768. Ezra Pound. Here's the tree. This would be the grandpapa of something. And Ezra, yep, there's the bark, if you will, or the woody stems. Tree peonies have woody stems. I haven't gone into all that today, and that's okay, but this is a tree, and it's getting bigger a little bit each year. It might get as big as 5 feet gradually. And these are wonderful blooms. And this is our 5th year, and just starting out, and you can come and see the peonies between now and July 4th. There will still be some on July 4th. The last buds will be winding up around July 4th. So come and see it multiple times if you can. See it in person. Bring your camera, bring your iPhone, take pictures, but please don't step in the garden like I do, because I know where all the things are we shouldn't step on, and people that do step in usually catch the signs with their shoes, or something happens. So thanks for honoring that it's kind of no trespassing unless you're a committee member or a trained weeder, and we welcome training. So welcome. Come and see many times the Reinhardt Peony Garden. On Mondays you might catch ChinWon Reinhardt weeding at 10 o'clock in the morning if she's up for it again this year. And she's, I believe, 90 or 91 now and loves this garden. She just thinks the variety of colors and foliage and blooms, it's wonderful. You will also, so thank you.